Good morning, everyone. Bonjour. I'm Charles Esser. I'm the Secretary General of E.DSO. So first, very much a warm welcome to our second FutureGrid Innovation Summit. Very pleased to see you here today. So many of you have come from far away, but also those of you who we know very well here in Brussels. I am just here to tell you a few practical things. First of all, take note of where the exits are for safety reasons, and I have some guidelines for participants. Just to let you know, the summit will be video recorded and made available after the event on our website via YouTube. Pictures will be taken during the event and used on E.DSO media, and you can see please take note again of where the emergency exits are marked and they're accessible throughout the venue. We can go to the next slide. I just would also like to note, yes, there are our sponsors, EPRI, LCP Delta, and FlexiGrid, our partner Energyville, our project sponsors, Be Flexible, Copper, EU Trace, EDI, Flow, Insieme, and TwinEU. And all of our sponsors and our projects have exhibition areas outside, so please take a look. Do go out, and when you come out, go to your right and take a look and talk to them. We also have there our startup companies with their presentations, so please do go talk to them, because later today you'll be voting on which startup gets the award. We can go to the next slide. There's our Wi-Fi. You can take a picture of the details or use the QR code. I'll let you take note of that or take a photo with your camera if you need to. Very easy to remember password. Okay, and then I would like to, it's my honor to introduce our chair, the chair of E.DSO, Johan Månstam, who is the CEO of E.ON Sweden, E.ON Nordics, and has been our chair since October 2024. And with that, I turn it over to our chair to give the opening address. Thank you.
So thank you, Charles, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see so many, both speakers, experts, and people that are really committed to the energy transition. And warm welcome to the second edition of the E.DSO FutureGrid Innovation Summit. Today, we have filled the room again, and we have not only filled the room with people. I'm sure that everyone here is committed to the energy transition, filled with ambition and expertise, and really the ambition and aspire to make a difference. And last year we were standing here, and then we had the first edition of the Grid Innovation Summit. And back then we talked about the geopolitical landscape, we talked about resilience, and we talked about the energy crisis on a global level. And I would say that those topics are even more relevant today. And actually, it has been intensified over the recent development that we have seen on a global level. And that's also why we today have the theme, the DSO of the future, as an architect of a decarbonized and resilient Europe. If we speak about climate change, if we speak about competitiveness, or if we speak about affordability and resilience, I think all those topics are super relevant for a DSO. And the DSOs are really in the midst of those words to meet those challenges that we see on a European level. That means that the DSOs are system orchestrators. We are also data facilitators. And we are, I have to say, a guarantee of the resilience of the energy system. But there are a few things that I think is important to point out. Even if we see the grid package, and I think that is pushing forward and put the grid of the DSOs high on the agenda, I think there are a few things that I think is important to make a few remarks around. The first one is to ensure that we can unlock investments. Even if the grid package acknowledges that there is a need for investments, I think we need to make sure that there is a full, transparent, long-term regulatory framework that really incentivizes investments, that is predictable. And we also need to make sure that those investments can be backed up by EU funding. I think that is number one, which is essential. The second one is that it's not only about a physical network, it's about a digitized network. And that also means that we need to make sure that there is an enabling for digitizing the network. And that means that there should be incentivization to make sure that we can build in smartness in the grid. Smartness in terms of managing data, but also smartness in terms of running the grids in an as efficient way as possible. The third element I would say is important is flexibility. It's important to note that flexibility is not a standalone activity. Flexibility is there to make sure that we can use the system in as an efficient way as possible. And the reason for doing so is cost efficiency, to make sure that we actually utilize what we have invested in physical assets in as smart way as possible. And I think there is one thing that I think is important to point out regarding flexibility. It's not either flexibility or investments. It's investments with flexibility on top. I think sometimes many tend to forget that. The fourth element, and that is coming up more and more in connection to the energy crisis, that is affordability and fairness. And I think here is something that is really important in terms of making sure that the energy transition is as fair and cost efficient as possible. Because at the end of the day, it's our customers that will pay for this. And that means that when we look into the design of tariff systems, it needs to be cost reflective, but it also needs to be steering a behavior that actually optimizes and uses the system in such an efficient way as possible. But it's also about reassuring and securing resilience. As I said, the grid is really in the core of making sure that we have a resilient energy system. If the E.DSO system does not work, we don't have an energy system. And here I would argue that the E.DSOs are really in the front line of the resilience. And that means also that we need to make sure that we are not only designing what I said regarding flexibility, investments, and affordability, that we are also designing a supply chain on a European level to make sure also that we have access to the equipment that is needed to build a resilient system. The sixth element that I would like to highlight is the workforce and competence. We are in an investment boom, but also that the grid is changing in its way how we work with it. It's a lot of digitization, it's a lot of new competences. And here we are arguing for a European-wide grid academy, but also that we have a European-wide certification system, which also enables us to make sure that we can move workforce across Europe, or actually the workforce can move across Europe without complicated licensing systems. Because without people, I mean, we can invest as much as possible, but without people, this will actually not happen. And this is the bottleneck. Last but not least, it's about what we have talked for so many years about. That's the permitting system, or the permitting processes. We see evidence that that has been accelerating, but it's not fast enough. And we need to make sure that if we want to really enable the energy transition, it's a race against time. We also see that there is a great expectation from industries that wants to connect to us, to the system. And with slow processes, that will not happen, and we will lose competitiveness from a European level. So as I said, it's a race of time, and that's also why we need to simplify and also digitize the permitting processes. And don't get me wrong, even if we simplify and accelerate the speed of the permitting processes, they need to be fair, transparent, so we are not creating hinders for some that wants to connect to the network. So, if I conclude with that, I would say that the grid package is a real step forward. And there are a lot of positive notes in the grid package that I think we are really, really happy about. But we believe that all the opportunities that we see in the market is not reflected fully in the grid package, even if we are positive to do the grid package. We see that there need to be further definitions of the framework regarding investments, on digitization, on supply chain, workforce, and EU funding, as I mentioned. So it's time for modernizing the frameworks for all the national regulators. And finally, and here I need to look at my note because it's a lot of thank you here. First of all, I would like to wish and thank our sponsors, EPRI, which are sharing the second panel debate today. I would also like to thank FlexiGrid, which will present their innovation on pathway to network flexibility, and LCP Delta, which will present their innovation on, and this is a long name on the innovation, multi-vector microgrid for industrial decarbonization and grid resilience this afternoon. That was a difficult one. I would also like to thank our partner Energyville, which is sharing the first panel, and the European research and innovation projects that E.DSO participates in for also supporting today's summit. That is Be Flexible, Copper, EDDI, EU Trace, Flow, INCIEM, and Twin EU. I would encourage you, all of you, to check out the exhibition area outside when we have a break throughout the day in the main hall. And it's also about the sponsors of the project. It's also about the 5 startup companies that are vying for the E.DSO 3rd Digital and Innovation Award. And here I would say, check out the innovations, because it's up to us who will be the winner. And with that, I would also say that we have some great keynote speakers lined up for you, who will give their views on the perspective on the European Commission, but also the Cypriot presidency of EU. So thank you very much and warm welcome to the second E.DSO FutureGrid Summit.
Thank you, Johan. And with that, indeed, we will call up our keynote speakers. Georgios Ioannidis, Deputy Permanent Representative of Cyprus to the European Union. Piotr Szymanski, Director, Energy Mobility and Climate at the Joint Research Center, European Commission. And Vincent Berruto, Head of Unit Digitalization, Competitiveness, Research and Innovation at DG ENER, European Commission. So please do come up. We'll start with Georgios Ioannidis, Deputy Permanent Representative of Cyprus to the EU.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Johan. It's indeed, I'm the non-expert in the room. So in a room full of, energy people, I am just the DPR of Cyprus, who is blessed to have the presidency of the Council of the EU at the time. And listening to Johan, it reminded me that we could have been working together last year when we were preparing the priorities for our presidency, because he talked about fairness, he talked about affordability, he talked about digitalization, simplification, innovation, and many others, flexibility. So all these are titles that are very high on our agenda, and hopefully in these 6 months, 5 months left, we'll be able to deliver for our industries, deliver for our citizens, deliver for the competitiveness of the European Union. So I'm happy to be here with you today, and allow me to start with an apology that, it's the presidency. It's Wednesdays when we have our long Coreper meeting, so I will not be able to stay with you for long. Apologies for that. So, as Johan said, we are meeting at a definitive time for Europe, for the world. We all know what's going on geopolitically, but also what is happening in the energy, in the European Energy Union. So the era of setting aspirational energy goals is now giving way to practical work, to work of building and implementing our goals on the ground now. So in our debates in the EU, but everywhere, we focus on targets, on climate targets, on green targets. But you here in your summit, and thank you again for having me, you address the very foundations of those targets. So electricity grids and the innovation, as Johan said, that is required in order to materialize our visions. So you are the doers. We are just the blah, blah people. So for us as presidency, electricity grids are one of the pillars, core pillars, that will make our shared European future and prosperity possible. Grids, as you very well know, are the veins and arteries of our energy system, carrying renewable energy, supporting the shift to electrification, safeguarding our strategic autonomy and global competitiveness. This is something that we'll repeat over and over again during our presidencies. This is why the grids package is at the very center of our priorities during our presidency. So we are pushing forward for the revision of the relevant legislation as proposed by the European Commission in order to reach a general approach, a tangible outcome by the June Council. So as Cyprus, we acknowledge the importance of building new cross-border interconnections, as well, of course, as utilizing existing ones, in order to maximize our capacity and to ensure a higher degree of energy flows and market integration. So both actions, enhancing the grids and optimizing existing infrastructure, are critical to completing the energy union and delivering the anticipated benefits for households, businesses, and our industries. So, of course, in every speech that we give, we emphasize Draghi report and Letta reports. And now they are particularly relevant that tomorrow we have the leaders' retreat, where Draghi and Letta will both be there. So, as emphasized in the Draghi report, grid investments are fundamental to safeguarding the EU's competitiveness. So our Simple as Cyprus is simple but ambitious. A regulatory setup that encourages genuine cross-border and regional cooperation so that no member is left as an energy island. Because the vision of a true European energy union is not just about infrastructure or markets. It is about ensuring that no member state, no industry, no citizen is left behind in this transition. All these resonate to what Johan said with fairness, affordability, the workforce, etc., etc. So that is why we consider the grids package a flagship, the flagship energy file of our presidency, with the objective, as I said, to conclude discussions by June. So, the grids package, we must acknowledge that the distribution level has an important role to play for the energy transition. DSOs are at the forefront of a digital revolution. Johan just said that. So you, all you, are responsible for integrating the vast majority of renewable sources, about 70% of which are connected at the distribution level. So you are the enablers of demand response, and you are the facilitators who allow prosumers, I like this word, prosumers, producers and consumers, to become an active and integral part of the energy market. Beyond mere infrastructure management, DSOs have evolved into what, again, Johan has said, system orchestrators at the local level, balancing increasingly complex bidirectional flows while ensuring the real reliability and security of supply that our economy depends on. To meet these challenges, we must move beyond traditional copper and cables solutions. Innovation through AI-driven grid monitoring, digital twins, and flexible connection agreements is the only way to scale our grids at the speed the climate transition demands. So our presidency is committed to ensuring that the regulatory framework provides you with the stable investment signals, again, Johan mentioned that, very important, and the technical flexibility, again, it was mentioned, that you need in order to manage these decentralized sources. A properly connected and digitalized European grid is what will underpin our union's competitiveness and strategic autonomy over the long term, while also being open to the world for partnerships and cooperation within the field. For those of you who don't know, the motto of the Cyprus presidency is Autonomous Union, Open to the World. So, ladies and gentlemen, developing our electricity grids demands ongoing, tireless cooperation between the EU institutions, member states, regulators, and most importantly, you, the operators. The Cyprus presidency will work step by step towards practical, balanced solutions that match our common goals. We remain fully committed to delivering the policy support you need so you can keep driving towards a secure, competitive, and sustainable energy system for all Europeans. Innovation, connectivity, resilience are not just technical terms. They are our requirements. They are the requirements for our survival and prosperity in the volatile environment we live in today. Fostering our ability to face successfully geopolitical tensions and minimize negative impacts is what we need to do. So with these few words coming from an unexpert, thank you for having me here today, and thank you for your dedication to building the future of the European grid. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really great to hear a presidency that really understands our sector and sees the value in it, so we really appreciate that. And with that, we'll go to our next keynote speaker, Piotr Szymanski, Director, Energy, Mobility, and Climate at the Joint Research Center. Thank you.
Excellent. There are still few places available in the front, so please don't hesitate and take them. It's better than standing in the back. Good morning. It's a great pleasure to be with you today. I work for the Joint Research Center in the European Commission, that's the Science and Knowledge Service. We provide impartial, evidence-based insights to support shaping EU policies in the era of rapid transformation. And transformation is precisely what defines our time. The electricity networks we once knew are being recast as we speak. The rapid growth of renewable energy sources, the electrification of key sectors, such as transport and heating, and relentless digitalization of the energy landscape pose significant challenges to the reliability and security of system operations. This is not merely evolution, it's a revolution. And revolution demands not just adaptation, but bold, forward-thinking innovation. And Joint Research Center Directorate on Energy, Mobility and Climate works on energy systems, networks and technologies in support of strategic EU policy initiatives. Our research found 3 interlocking pillars which need to underpin the future of Europe's grids, each one a cornerstone of stability, ambition and innovation. First, resilience to keep the lights on when there were changes. Second, competitiveness to support the European market leadership. And third, digitalization to provide intelligent control of the grid. Let's look deeper into each of these 3 pillars, drawing on real-world examples from our research, because we believe the grids of tomorrow will be built on actionable science. So first pillar is resilience, how to keep the lights on. The answer depends on various factors that are combining their effects. First, the surge of distributed generation. Across 68 distribution system operators which participate in our observatory, nearly 70% already experience reverse power flows, and more than 80% report voltage violations. Those figures are warning lights that the grid is being asked to operate beyond the conditions for which it was designed. Second, climate impacts. We asked distribution system operators to report unplanned outages, including the effect of extreme weather conditions. According to their feedback, in 2023, most of the grid operators experienced unplanned interruptions, falling within a range between 1 and 150 minutes per customer. Third, the electrification of transport and heating. The data we gathered tells us that over 2.5 million electric vehicle charging points are already in operation in the distribution grids. Such new loads need to be carefully considered in grid planning and operations to adequately design the system and avoid congestion. The path to a resilient grid includes various actions and solutions. Climate-proof planning is crucial. Climate-driven extreme weather events are causing increased service disruptions, affecting key reliability metrics. Strengthening grid infrastructure and implementing adaptive resilience strategies is key for mitigating risks. Flexibility must be brought to scale. Our observatory shows that 54% of DSOs already procure flexibility, mainly to relieve congestion. By incentivizing industrial and commercial consumers, aggregators, and even residential prosumers to offer demand response and storage services, the system can safely tackle demand-supply mismatches. Second pillar is competitiveness. As highlighted in the grids package, the insufficient integration and underinvestment in our energy infrastructure has direct impact on energy bills of European citizens and the development of strategic sectors across Europe, such as net zero industries or digital. A secure digital grid becomes a true asset only when it fuels economic growth and positions Europe as a leader in clean energy technology. The shift towards anticipatory investments and flexibility procurement is gaining traction, but existing tariff structures don't always cover digitalization and operational costs. Regulatory frameworks must evolve to encourage innovation and while maintaining cost efficiency. Regulatory experimentation can provide such space for innovation, and more than half of DSOs we surveyed are already participating in regulatory sandboxes, testing new protection schemes, dynamic reconfiguration tools, and automated restoration processes. By expanding these safe space experiments, innovators can try ideas expanding the grid capacity to better integrate low-carbon energy. We can support competitiveness in energy sector also by guaranteeing the integration and interplay of energy smart appliances for demand response and flexibility services. JRC works with DGNR on a dedicated code of conduct to drive innovation and foster interoperability among energy smart appliances, ensuring seamless communication and collaboration across diverse product ecosystems. First version of a code of conduct brought together 11 leading manufacturers of products such as heat pumps and household appliances, which have since registered hundreds of interoperable solutions in the official database, enabling consumers to benefit from flexible and energy-smart products. As we progress towards the second edition of the Code of Conduct, more energy appliances and solutions are covered, from PV inverters, storage technologies to energy management solution. The collaborative effort between industry, academia, and policymakers is instrumental in driving innovation, consumer empowerment, and sustainable energy solution across the EU market. Also, storage represents a critical enabler for a more competitive and flexible energy market. The JRC European Energy Storage Inventory offers a comprehensive continent-wide overview of more than 3,000 grid-connected energy storage projects and is made available through online dashboard and an interactive map. The inventory covers technologies from pumped hydro to emerging lithium-ion and flow battery projects and shows a steady upward trend in electrochemical storage capacity. This is an indication that the market is already moving beyond traditional hydro solutions toward technologies that can be co-located with PV, wind, and EV chargers. This diversification of storage options is critical enabler for the flexibility services, supporting the integration of renewable energy sources, enabling more efficient grid capacity investment decisions, and enhancing overall system resilience. The third pillar is digitalization. Is already embedded in distribution grids via smart meters and other IT solutions. Nonetheless, only a limited number of low-voltage substations are equipped for remote control, leaving a blind spot precisely where the majority of distributed resources, rooftop PV, home batteries, EV chargers are located. Improved sensing and control capabilities may help unlock flexibility from both electricity demand and operation of the grid itself, facilitating the integration of renewables and enabling a more efficient and cost-effective operation of the system. Excuse me. Now, artificial intelligence has to be mentioned, but this seems to be the next big thing also in the electricity sector. Today, AI solutions already support a wide range of applications in energy system, from grid maintenance to load forecasting, illustrating its growing relevance and versatility. We have to repeat again that artificial intelligence is not only the large language models. The JRC has recently assessed the uptake of the AI Act by European distribution system operators. Our recent survey reports reveals that AI deployment is at an early stage. AI is used mainly for contributing to sustainability goals, optimizing energy use, while methodologies are being developed for its further intake. And of course, we need to make sure that the AI is trustworthy, guaranteeing that digital innovation in energy system aligns with reliability, security, and emerging EU governance frameworks. Looking ahead, the potential of AI goes beyond individual use cases. Now, more holistic approaches are emerging, moving from isolated applications towards system-wide intelligence in network planning and operation. To realize this potential, AI solutions must be carefully designed and tested to ensure reliability, accountability, and security, while enabling the paradigm shift in how electricity systems are planned and operated. In this context, the JRC is participating in the new AI Grids project, which brings together several energy sector stakeholders, including TSOs, DSOs, academia, and utilities, to develop prototypes of foundation models for energy systems. These foundation models are large-scale, pre-trained AI systems built on vast and diverse datasets, which promise to serve as versatile base for various energy planning and operational tasks. To conclude, challenges ahead for power grids are substantial. Tackling them requires innovation, market-based tools, effective regulatory schemes, strategic investment, and strong collaboration across the energy sector. In this context, the Joint Research Center will continue delivering evidence-based analysis, testing frameworks and knowledge platforms to empower operators and other decision makers to integrate low-carbon energy, AI and digital technologies, as well as flexible storage at scale. At the same time, we seek to bring the consumer's voice to the fore, enabling households to participate in demand-side flexibility and ensuring that energy systems are interoperable, secure, and beneficial for the end users. By bridging research, standards, and policy, we aim to guarantee that innovation advances hand in hand with system reliability. Looking ahead, we are preparing the next edition of the Distribution System Operators Observatory for 2026 and expanding the European Energy Storage Inventory to reflect market developments. Those efforts depend on continuous engagement with stakeholders across Europe, of course. And that's why we remain committed in deepening cooperation with energy system stakeholders to better contribute to the delivery of resilient, competitive, and decarbonized European power system. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the GRC's work to identify challenges and solutions for our sector. And so, last but not least, it's my pleasure to introduce Vincent Berruto, who is Head of Unit for Digitalization, Competitiveness, Research, and Innovation at DG Ener, and of course, someone who knows our sector very well and has been supportive of DSOs for a long time. So thank you. Vincent.
Thank you, Charles, and good morning to everyone. So it's my pleasure to give you now the point of view of DG Ener. I think it's been nearly a year now since the adoption of our Affordable Energy Action Plan, that is our roadmap to lower the energy costs, to lower our CO2 emissions, and to increase our energy supply security. And a lot of progress has been achieved since the adoption of that action plan. I think a lot was said already this morning about the grids package, which was adopted in December. I think this is a landmark decision, and now we count, of course, on the co-legislators to bring it forward. It aims at better using existing energy infrastructure, but also at expanding the development of grids. And among other things, the package aims to enhance the efficiency of existing infrastructures by integrating new technologies. That's what we're going to discuss today. Implementing flexibility, as was said by the previous speakers, and expanding storage capacity. So all these topics will be addressed extensively today, and that's very interesting. I won't say more on the grids package because that was already well covered. What I can say is that if we look at the situation now, after 1 year of implementation of the action plan, or energy prices are still too high, or energy imports are still too high, or CO2 emissions are still too high. So that's no time for complacency, despite the whole progress that has been made. And this is why at the European Commission, at DG Energy, we are working on new initiatives. And let me mention a few that are relevant for what we will be discussing today in this conference. In the next 6 months, so I will focus on the next 6 months. First of all, on the 10th of March, we will adopt a clean energy investment strategy, which is our strategy to leverage private finance for the clean energy transition, and also mobilize public funding, of course. And among these investments, of course, there will be investments in research and innovation, so we will cover that aspect in the strategy. At the same time, we should adopt our citizens' energy package, which aims at empowering but also engaging consumer in the energy transition in a fair and just manner. Then a bit later, and we think that could take place in April, we'll have our strategic roadmap on digitalization and AI in the energy sector. That's something we're very much keen on. We're, in my unit in particular, working very hard on it, and you will listen to Mark van Stiepart in a few minutes, who will tell you more about that. And later in my speech, I will also cover that aspect, because like Piotr said, I mean, AI can bring a lot of benefits to the energy system. So how can we unlock that potential today? Soon after that roadmap, we'll have an electrification action plan, which will aim at increasing electrification of the energy system, but also increasing the penetration of renewable energy sources. And around the same time, or if not at the same time, there will be also a heating and cooling strategy to address that very important end-use sector, which represent half of our energy consumption. These are some examples of what's coming in the next 6 months. A lot of initiatives, and in each of them you can expect due consideration being given to research and innovation. We believe that's a very, very important aspect, and including, of course, in great technologies. It's a no-brainer. It's clear there's no economic security, there's no energy transition without solid research and innovation. I mean, that was said in the Draghi report, of course. I mean, we hope to mention the Draghi report again. It's essential. Discovering, developing, deploying new clean energy solutions is also key for our competitiveness. Bear in mind that the International Energy Agency found out that the global market for the key net zero technologies will more than triple by 2035 to amount to more than $2 trillion. So we need to seize that opportunity. We are still very competitive in a lot of net zero technologies, and smart grid is a good example. By investing in research and innovation, we can keep our competitive edge. We can even become more competitive worldwide in a global context, which is becoming, where competition is becoming more and more important. In particular coming from Asia. Equally important, of course, is to make sure that our innovations reach the market and that we can scale them up. And that's why we are currently boosting the Strategic Energy Technology Plan, the SET plan, that many of you probably know. This is our tool at European Union level to coordinate the research and innovation policies and funding between ourselves, the 27 member states, but also the EEA countries. We've changing gear in the SET plan. I mean, we adopted at the end of last year, a new governance. We extended the geographical coverage. We now have the 27 member states with us. We nominated a new steering group at a high level, and we're working towards common investment and implementation plan, not just looking at research and innovation, but also looking at the market uptake. That's a very important component of the new SET plan. And let me take that opportunity to mention the excellent work that is being done by the European Technology and Innovation Platform on smart networks for the energy transition, the ETIPSnet. I mean, within the SET plan, I'm very impressed by what they're doing. While we revise the SET plan and while we implement the new SET plan, we will also change the mandate of the different working group. And you know there are two that are very much relevant for the discussion today. These are the working group on smart grid and the working group on direct current technologies. At the same time, so this is about coordination. At the same time, we also continue, of course, funding research and innovation in smart grid technologies through the Horizon Europe program. Let me mention that the work program for this year and next year was adopted in December last year, and there you find all the priorities that we have agreed upon with the member states to support research and innovation in that field. Overall is around 2.2 billion euro over 2 years for research and innovation in clean energy technologies, and out of this, you've got about 100 million that have been earmarked for advanced solutions for electricity grid, and around 75 million euro that have been earmarked for AI-based solutions. AI, digitization, these are two big priorities that we have when it comes to grids. And I'd like to now address that last point. How do we unlock the potential of digitization and AI in the energy system to make it greener, but also more secure and also more affordable? Today, as Piotr said, we see a number of applications of AI in the energy sector, so we want to have more of them. We want to engage the DSOs, the TSOs also in that work stream. Of course, we at the same time are conscious about the challenges of using AI and digital solutions in the energy system, notably in terms of cybersecurity, but also in terms of the growing energy consumption of data centers. I mean, today it's about 2-3% of the electricity used, but it's highly concentrated. In Ireland, for instance, it's 20% of the electricity used. So we need to address that challenge too. And this is why we are preparing the strategic roadmap on digitization and AI in the energy sector, which should be adopted in the coming months. Our objective is to unlock the benefits, of course, but also address the challenges that I mentioned. And we had countless meetings with stakeholders. And I really would like to thank you, because I know that many of you, and I see a lot of familiar faces here, have been participating in these workshops. We had 14 workshops, more than 1,500 people involved in those consultations. And we learned a lot about what the needs are from the energy actors and what needs to be done at European level. Among all the workshops, we had a high-level event on the 19th of November, which was co-chaired by our Commissioner for Energy, Dan Jorgensen, but also the Executive Vice President, Virkkunen. That was the climax of the consultation process. I know E.DSO was represented in that high-level event. It was an important moment in the consultation. We also launched an open public consultation, which closed on the 5th of November. And when we asked the stakeholders what the main barriers are to deploy digital and AI solutions in the energy sector, the barriers that was mentioned by the highest number of respondents was the limited access to high-quality data. And that comes time and again when you consult stakeholders. So this is something we're taking very seriously. We're working on the establishment of a common European energy data space. Work has started, and there will be more information about that in the upcoming roadmap. What came out also is the need to step up investments in smart grids with smart grids indicators. And there, again, the work has already started, and we were very glad that Acer and SEER came out recently with their proposals for such indicators, and we'll discuss that again at the next Copenhagen Forum. We also asked people the areas of the energy system which would benefit the most from the deployment of digital and AI solutions. And guess what? The answer that came first was power grid management. So that's a use case that we will be very much focusing on before expanding to other use cases. I think that's looking at, of course, aspects like flexibility, vehicle to grids. These are important areas that we need to tackle with our roadmap. What stakeholders ask us also to look at is to look forward and accelerate the development of new AI solutions for the energy sector, which means, in particular, developing AI foundation models for energy. And at the same time, they ask us to address the challenges that I mentioned. So we will also have, together with the roadmap, a data center energy efficiency package and measures to increase or facilitate the integration of data centers into the energy system. So all these issues will be addressed in the roadmap, so stay tuned. And I've got exactly 27 seconds now to finish. So let me conclude to say that innovation in grids is very high on our agenda, and many EU initiatives will support stakeholders in this area, you in particular. And the discussion that we will have today will facilitate the implementation of those initiatives. They will also help us with what's coming in the longer term. I'm talking here about the revision of the Energy Union governance by the end of the year, but also at the next multi-annual financial framework, which will start from 2028 onwards. And you may have seen that we propose to double the size of the Horizon Europe program, so more funding for research and innovation. We've also proposed to multiply by 5 the budget for cross-border energy connections. So we're counting on the Council and the Parliament now to give us that budget. And while we are thinking of all that and the short-term but also the longer-term measures, we are in need of your ideas. We need your energy. Only by working together will we succeed in creating an energy landscape that is cleaner, more secure, but also more competitive. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much to our keynote speakers. Let's have another quick round of applause for all three of them. Great to hear all the work of the European Commission on behalf of our sector, so we really do appreciate that. Thank you, and thank you again to all of our keynote speakers who can now exit the stage. Thank you. Thank you. And now we're going to start with our first panel, and to set the scene, we have Luís Cunha from our member E.DSO Portugal, and also former chair of ETIPS.net, and a friend of mine. So, Luís, welcome.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Charles. Good morning to everyone. Just 1 second. Okay, thank you. Well, yep, I think I can play with this. Okay, I would like you just to take a moment to look at the screen. So, what you see there, ladies and gentlemen, in our opinion, is that we spent a decade planning the energy transition, and we now need to implement it. This is very clear to all of us, and I think this is the main motto of my presentation for today. Yep. I'm just wondering if I can, yep. Okay, good, thank you. When you look at this slide, I mean, you should also look at the clock and think at your watch and say, okay, in energy planning terms, 2035 was yesterday. So we need to embed this reasoning in our minds, making sure that we prepare the things in advance so that we can have a smooth energy transition. And when we look at the rate of implementation of this energy transition, this is not a smooth upward curve. This is indeed a vertical wall. So we are putting a lot of pressure. Just to give you some figures that I got around, we are going to do in the next 9 years the same thing that we have been doing in the way we connect loads and generation to our networks during the past 50 years. I think this is a quite impressive figure, and I think sometimes we need to stop just for a moment and think a little bit about this. When we also look at the figures of the implementation, the ratio of renewables connect to our grids, the EV vehicles, the heat pumps, and all this energy transition that is happening right now, we realize that the energy transition is a distribution story. It's not only about connecting the big power plants, it's mostly about giving power to the people, making sure that the energy transition reaches everyone. Well, okay. Now, looking at the grid architecture, I mean, we have been speaking about this time and time again, but it's really important that we understand that we no longer live in a vertical world where we have generation, TSOs, DSOs, and consumers. We now live in a more decentralized world where DSOs need to interconnect with the several actors. We need to integrate new ways of generating energy. We need to integrate hydrogen. We need to integrate all the heat pumps, PV panels, and everything that we've been discussing. We need very much to coordinate everything with the TSOs, but all of this can only be done, as mentioned by the previous speakers, if we have a seamless way to integrate all the data that needs to flow. Because what we don't want to have is, for the sake of balancing the global system, suddenly we realize that it's a small village there that is going to have a congestion or a small problem. Oh, I mean, probably somewhere, okay. Now I see, good, thank you, sorry for that. Now we're going to the main point of our discussion. We did a long evaluation of more than 250 technologies across the past year. And one thing was very clear in our exercise, is that at European level, we have a very brilliant mind. This is the software part. We know very well how to build ADMS solutions, MDMS solutions, SCADA solutions, and all the stuff that we need to run our grids. But the problem is that we have a weak body. So we have a strong mind with a weak body. And this weak body is about hardware. If you think about silicon, if you think about chips, if you think about batteries, almost every single component is coming from outside of Europe. And we need to price in all these dependencies in our cost-effective deployment of technologies. So bringing the most cost-effective technology is not only about lowering the capex, it's mostly about integrating and pricing in this security and resilience that we need to consider. We also mentioned AI a couple of times this morning. We did also very relevant work, in our opinion, on the implications of AI in the energy sector, most concretely on the distribution grids. And one thing is very clear. If we want to achieve the goals that we need to achieve, we need to rely more and more on AI. But this means that AI should be carefully run. I use the example here. AI is like an over-caffeinated teenager. It can do a lot of things that we cannot do. That is clear for everyone. But suddenly, if you have a congestion, AI can easily suggest to you that you should delete the block so that you can solve the congestion. So hallucination is part of the game, and this is why we need human in the loop. At least for the time being, we know that this is true, and we know that AI is going to help us, but we need to oversee everything that is coming from AI. On flexibility, I think we talk a lot of times about flexibility and the holy grail of this energy transition. It can be indeed, but I think it can only be if we are successful in implementing AI. And what we see here is that when it comes to technology, I think we are already there. We have all technologies to implement flexibility in our systems. But one of the problems is that when we move from technology to commercial adoption, to implementation. And this is where we see the real problem starting to appear. Because we know that nobody can cope with the speed of changes in the energy markets and all the things that we need to cope to match the needs of the grid. That means we have to have AI to support us in our decision. This is where AI automation comes in. This is where data interfaces need to be put in. Not only the central foundation models, also the edge solutions that we need to take over to make sure that we also manage the energy transition. Finally, I would like to introduce you a concept that we coined a couple of months ago, which is the grid supportiveness factor. It's a way of measuring if any flexible solution is able to deploy the real value to the grid. I think it's important that whenever we speak about flexibility, we also think about the real power of flexibility when it comes to supporting the grid. Now, on the roadmap. Well, we talk a lot about investment, but the truth is that anticipatory investment is make sure that we have things ready when we need them. This is what we mean about anticipatory investment. This is all about planning our activities. And as I mentioned, 2035 was already yesterday. So we need to take care of this very carefully, and I know that we all are doing a lot of effort on that. Regulation. I mean, let's be honest on this. If we have a regulatory sandbox, if we test something, if it is successful, then the only solution is to roll out the product that we test. So there is no excuse for that. If the regulation doesn't cope with the technology, I think we should change the regulation because technology is there and we need to use it. And we need, of course, to industrialize and to price in all this resilience that I mentioned in the previous slide. On the 3 pillars for the future grid. Well, I try to summarize everything in a single slide here. Just to mention one thing, we are very good at piloting also at European level. I even call it pilotitis. It's my way of calling a disease that we have, that we pilot a lot, but we implement much less than we should. So we should stop piloting and we should start implementing. We should, of course, price in resilience, make sure that every single piece of our smart grid allow us to have control in our independent sovereignty in grid of the future. And finally, we should perfect this handshake, meaning that we cooperate with all stakeholders. We have seamless ways of providing data and interchanging data, and we make this in a smooth way. Finally, I think that the message should be more or less clear. So we have the technology is there. I don't have any doubts on that. we have the roadmap. We know where we need to go in 10 years from now on. And finally, the question that we have now is, and I hope the panel can help us to figure out what will be the answer to this question. Do we have the regulatory strength and the financial capability to make these things happen? So thank you very much, and I wish a very insightful panel. Thank you.
So with that, thank you very much, Luis. I'd like to call up our discussion leader for our first panel, Helena Gerard, from our partner Energyville, who's a unit leader there and works with us on many European projects. So Helena, please come forward.
Okay, good morning. So the great acceleration, when I saw the title, it sounds a bit like a superstar movie, the next blockbuster. So that means that perfect introduction to introduce you to our A-list star panel. And let's hope that they bring this movie to a good end. So please welcome the panelists of the first panel. So that will be Mark van Stiphout representing European Commission, Ricardo Loureiro, member of the board representing the Portuguese regulator ERSE, Miriam Larsson, senior energy specialist from the European Investment Bank, Juan Ortiz Noval, head of network operation representing Spanish E.DSO and E.DSO, and last but not least, Hubert Dupin from Enedis representing the project in Siena. Please come on stage. And while they are looking for their seat and thinking about what they can bring into this new E.DSO movie, they will have a challenge. They will get exactly 90 seconds to pitch already their main message, what they like you to remember from this panel. And then, of course, it's up to you, after 50 minutes of intense debate, to decide whether you agreed with what they pitched at the first 90 seconds. So yeah, maybe let's start immediately with you, Mark. Welcome. 90 seconds, so policy in the core of the debate.
Yes, thank you, Elena, and thanks, E.DSO, for inviting me. Yes, I think that we're on to the challenge, basically. We've set the targets. The framework is there. We had a big work over the last Commission in getting the Green Deal adopted with a lot of ambition on renewables and energy efficiency. Now the grids package is out. So we are all about making sure that all this is implemented. And we have, I think, an ambition plan for the coming years. We have, of course, we're there to help to implement all these things. We're putting, I think, our money where our mouth is with the next budget. And like Vincent just mentioned, proposing to double Horizon Europe and multiply by 5 the Connecting Europe facility. So as far as we are concerned, the framework is there. It needs to be implemented. Of course, it's a lot of different things that need to work together. But yeah, our approach is get going and start working. And of course, there will be things that need to be solved along the way. But that is nothing new from what we've been doing so far.
Okay, sounds like the perfect transition to our next speaker. Juan, E.DSO's in the spotlight. You like it?
Yeah. Okay. First, I would like to thank you on behalf of E.Distribución of this gentle invitation. I will start with a little bit context about Spain. In year 2024, in Spain, we received 67 gigawatts of new demand. This corresponds approximately to 40% of the total contractually granted capacity of Spain. Of these 67 gigawatt, just 10% could be granted. 40% is still on study, and 50% almost was be rejected. It's clear that there is a saturation in the Spanish network. Nowadays, the saturated nodes of the Spanish network is about 86% of the total nodes. I know that a lot has to be done in Spain about renewable integration. Just one data, the number of prosumers increased by 37 from year 2020 to 2024, okay? But it's clear that probably we didn't have invested too smart, as the blackout of the 28th April shows. Because we may discuss for months which was the triggering event of this blackout, but I think there is no doubt that the final cause of the blackout was the lack of capability to control, of voltage control capabilities, okay? So if we take a look to Europe, we see that the action plan for grids states that 40% of Europa's grids have more than 40 years. That in the next years we will have to invest from 10 to 1 to 2030, between 375 billions to 425 billions. And even if we look at the horizon 2014, we should invest 760 billion euros on our networks. At the very end, I think we have an important challenge. On the short term, if we will make the best out of our assets, it's clear that we have to invest smart. We have to invest in digitalization, and we have to invest in flexibility. But I think regulators have also a role. They should improve a framework that recognizes better our OpEx expenditures. But on the long term, at the very end, I think we have also to invest more, because if we want to refurbish our networks, if we want to be prepared for the climatic change, and we want to have resilient networks, and if we want to create more capacity, at the very end, we have to invest also much more. So my conclusion would be...
So thank you, Juan. I think you're already answering my second, third, and fifth question. So, so perfect. But I think you actually also made a perfect transition towards Hubert, because you mentioned digitalization. Hubert, Insieme and digitalization, match made in heaven.
Yes, indeed. We all know flexibility is meant to improve the efficiency of network development and operations. It's for system operators no longer to rely on their own means, but to leverage the capacities of system users and other stakeholders. How they do this? With data exchange. Indeed, from a system user, you have many reasons to be flexible. We can call them flexibility programs. You may want to just optimize your energy bill, react to tariff signals. Maybe you want to engage in balancing local services, flexible connection agreement, exchange energy. All this basically differs in the onboarding, in the contractual rules, and in the settlement rules. But in terms of data exchange, command and control exchange, accessing meter data, DMD data, smart meter data, it's the same. So indeed, that's what we do for Insieme. We develop all this data exchange to enable discussions, exchanging data, and leveraging those flexibilities. And indeed, what we think that there is enough projects. We do believe that the Insieme project should be the last one, because if we have a project later on, then it will be way too late for the energy transition. So we no longer reply to any proposal. We just think Insieme is the last project.
Okay, thanks a lot. Moving on to Ricardo. Juan made already a strong point on regulation, and Hubert mentioned the need for being fast. What's your take?
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I will try to give you the regulatory perspective. And I've just noticed that I am the only regulator sitting on this panel and participating at this event. So please go easy on me. So a lot has been said today for my previous speakers about the challenge and about the context. We all recognize that DSOs sit at the very center of the energy transition. They are where electrification materializes, where distributed resources connect, where innovation, new technologies, and digital solutions happen in the field. And the grid package reflects the recognition that adequate and resilient grids are a key enabler of decarbonization, competitiveness, and affordability. So where investments is insufficient or poorly sequenced, consumers may face higher prices, may face delay in connections, a curtailment of renewables, and ultimately constraints on economic activity. For regulators, however, the challenge is not simply to ensure that more investment takes place, but to ensure that investment is efficient, is timely, and delivers a value to consumers. So this requires navigating a complex set of trade-offs that I will try to go deeper in my following interventions. And I think I will just stop by here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And then last but not least, Miriam, well, in a panel about investments, the economic financial perspective is important. So tell us more.
Thank you very much, Elena, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and join the discussion. So I think building on what Ricardo already said, and the EU grid package is very clear on that what Europe needs is not just more investments. It needs smarter investments, more targeted investments, but also more system-wide thinking when planning the investments. And this aligns very well with the European Investment Bank's energy sector orientation, which was published last year. For us to start with investing smarter means anticipatory planning. It requires that the DSOs have both the tools but also the visibility in order to build their capacity ahead of time and knowing where the renewables are coming and the demand load will be. So how to build a more smarter, cost-effective system in Europe? It requires policy alignment, both on EU level and national levels, but also regulatory clarity on the remuneration of anticipatory investments. But it also depends on supply chain capacity and the right skill sets and labor resources in order to develop innovative solutions. And finally, of course, financing tools, including long-term loans, blended finance, but also risk-sharing mechanisms are critical to support digitalization and innovation. So in conclusion, cost-effectiveness also means bankability, and the EIB stands ready to support this, and we have increased our support to electricity grid significantly and reached record levels last year of 11.6 billion of financing to electricity grid and grid storage projects. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So now we're all warmed up. We can go a bit more in depth into some of the very interesting points already mentioned. And let's maybe start already with, I would say, the key question of the panel, smart investment. What does it mean? When is something smart? And maybe starting immediately with Juan. From the DSO perspective, it was already nicely mentioned by Miriam. There is a need for tools, there is a need for skill set, there is a need for remuneration to become more efficient. Can you maybe highlight where do you see some inefficiencies today and where you see that innovation can bring us a step forward?
I think there are three, when we talk about the efficiencies, I think we have 3 pain points: lack of anticipation, lack of coordination with DSO, and also this paradigm of first come, first serve allocation scheme bring us to a situation where at the very end we are in a gridlock status. Lack of anticipation, there is no way to, today we react. We are only planning in a reactive mode. When a need comes out, then we start to think how we will solve this need. There are no long-term scenarios that are recognized by the regulators. Each company may imagine his long-term scenario, but there is not a structural solution. So at the very end, we are just reacting, and I think there are guidance. For instance, the The Commission note guidance on anticipatory investments is a good guidance to see how we should look to the future and not just act in a reactive way. The lack of coordination with TSO, I think is also an issue. There are windows of coordination with TSO, but things are going very fast nowadays in the market. So we should have a continuous coordination, because many times when DSO arrive to this window to coordinate with TSOs, we realize that there is no more remaining capacity. Then, of course, the first come, first serve approach is a politic that we were executing for a long time, and we have to respect all the granted powers. But from now on, I think we should to change our approach, because this is bringing us directly to the exhaust of available capacity and to this gridlock status where we are stuck now.
Okay, very interesting. Anticipation and coordination as important drivers. Then I look, of course, at the regulators. What can you do to make, indeed, those elements to lead to more cost effectiveness in investments?
Yes, so I guess it's commonly accepted that investment in grids is necessary, right? And particularly at the distribution network, where the assets are getting old, so we need to replace them. And we, of course, we have to fulfill the policy goals on the energy transition and on the decarbonization that are set. So the DSOs must fulfill the objectives of connecting renewables into their grid, connecting new consumption into the grid. So investment in grids is of course necessary. This is undisputed, even in the regulatory bodies. Okay, but I think it is important to note that the energy transition is not only an investment challenge; it is also an efficiency challenge. So the regulatory role is to ensure that investments are adequate, needed, proportionate, and future-proof. Okay, so grid reinforcement shouldn't necessarily be the default. Sometimes the best grid investment is perhaps avoiding one, or perhaps choosing a non-wire option. And by a non-wire option, I mean investing in digital tools, forecasting, flexibility procurement, predictive O&M. So this set of tools often delivers fast and cheaper results. So regulatory frameworks should ensure that these non-wire options are not disadvantaged compared to traditional grid expansion. And how do we do that? Among other things, I think we do that from a regulatory perspective through a well-designed incentive regulation approach. And in Portugal, for instance, we have introduced a tow tax approach. This strange word means that we look to the total expenditures of network operators instead of looking separately to the CAPEX and to the OPEX. So we certainly overpass or overcome some called the CAPEX bias. And by doing that, looking indistinguishably between CAPEX and OPEX, we encourage network operators to choose the most efficient solution, whether it be a physical reinforcement or a digital, investing in digital tool or an operational measure. And this was introduced in Portugal in 2021, and for this new regulation period that started in this year, we have maintained that TOTEX approach because we assess it internally, and it was a success. But this success, it was only possible with another milestone that we achieved in Portugal, which is the rollout of smart meters. For you to have an idea, in Portugal we have, by the end of 2025, 99% of our low voltage clients have a smart meter. And most importantly, 99% of those clients are integrated into a smart grid. Okay, so when we compare, for instance, and I don't know if there are people from Germany, but when we compare this with countries like Germany, when we have such a low implementation of smart meters, around 12 to 15%, we see that this is a huge step to introduce the TOTEX model.
Okay, that's a very strong point. Maybe actually I want to ask to Marika, because there were a couple of elements now mentioned. It was not only about smart investment, but also about overall efficiency. So it's not only about how can we have the most economically smart decision, it's a much bigger picture. If we think about this from a more system perspective, what should we do and how should we do it? And what is the Commission doing for us? Or to support it?
Right. And that in 20 minutes? Or how?
Something like that.
No, let me, let's say, at least highlight a few things that I think are particularly relevant. And I think indeed what Juan and Ricardo both mentioned together make up already quite a lot of the picture. It's both about better planning, about anticipating what's coming and the regulatory framework allowing for that, but it's also about looking at, let's say, what is the cheapest and the most efficient investment. And I think there are a few things that are, in a way, quick wins that we are, I think, also quite a bit emphasizing, and also things that, you know, should have happened already everywhere and are not happening everywhere yet. For example, if you talk about smart meters, that we need to start with. So one key point I want to mention that I think is relevant for all of this is observability. I think the observability, in particular in the distribution grid, is simply not good enough. It's many DSOs are not able to steer, let's say, or improve the load factor of the grid because they don't really know enough about it. And also, if you look at figures on the load factors of distribution grids, how are they actually being used, these figures are very, very hard to find. But I'm pretty sure if we look at, let's say, what we know from over the years, that these can be improved greatly. So there is really a lot of things that can be done in terms of making more efficient use of the grid. That, of course, requires observability, and a key part of the observability start with the meters. And this is something that, for example, also clearly came out of this work that the regulators, together with the network operators, have been doing on smart grid indicators. Trying to identify what are the things that how we can measure where we're actually making the right investments in making the grid smarter. One of the key things that came out was invest in observability. So I think that's a key point, and that then will trigger down with many things, because then you can start talking about steering for flexibility markets, demanding people connected to the grid to contribute to increasing the load factor of the grid. For that, we need to, of course, address the data exchange and make that easy. And I fully agree with what Hubert said about let's, after InShame, start actually making this happen in, let's say, in reality, and not anymore a project to test things, because they are testing things and showing that this works. So, yeah, the observability, the increasing the flexibility, and I think what we are doing about this is, yeah, so I mentioned the smart grid indicators, but let's also look at the grids package, which clearly puts a requirement to look at alternatives to copper investments as, let's say, as the first option that everybody in the scenarios, in the planning needs to look at. I think Ricardo mentioned very good examples of how also the regulatory framework needs to evolve to go away from this capex bias that I think we're all aware of, but getting away from it as a regulator I think is also pretty hard, because these are very sophisticated models, and regulators are under constant scrutiny to make sure that the tariffs are not too high. But on the other hand, if there is a, let's say, the cost of underinvestment are maybe more difficult to foresee, but they are, I think we see now in a few countries like in the Netherlands, much higher than the cost of overinvestment. And I think also making that balance integrating that into the equation is key. And for us, that has part to do with the regulatory framework, but again, also with the observability and better scenario making that looks at all the alternatives. So I wouldn't say this is a complete picture of everything that's happening, but I just wanted to highlight a few things that I think together are really driving the change. But we're not there. It really still needs to be implemented.
That triggers immediately, of course, the question towards Hubert. So a lot of hope for the outcomes of the NCMA project, the role of digitalization to actually move towards implementation and upscaling. Can you tell us a little bit more? Those alternatives like flexibility, digital tools. What comes out of NCMA as insights? How can we actually use them to go away from this CapEx bias?
Well, as Louis said, most of the new flexible resources are connected on the DSO network. EVs, renewables, heat pumps, name them all. Even generation, there will be, and there is probably already more generation on the DSO grid than on centralized DSO grid. So indeed, we need to be able to access this flexibility, and there are a few things that we need to do. First, in terms of governance, key operational requirements, roles, and responsibilities for data exchange. It is a methodology under SOGL, which is a network code only drafted by TSOs. It's no longer fit for the current world, and it's no longer fit for the future world. All these methodologies on network code requirements, technical requirements for generators, technical requirements for demand units, all these needs to be now jointly drafted by TSOs and DSOs so that it's fit for future. We achieved it for network code demand response. We achieved it for cybersecurities, so we need to draft. And when we define the rules, then we can also access the data and the assets. And how we work in NCMA, we develop harmonized role procedures to actually exchange data, and we identify the roles such as DR operator, DR aggregators that can trigger the resources for the customers to leverage the flexibility programs, and those third parties, or maybe it's inside service providers, they can value the flexibility for others. So all these frameworks, that's what we define in CMA. We test it in real scale. Hopefully we can deliver at scale. Actually at NADIS, we use the same APIs that we use for business as usual markets. We extend it for all these use cases. And indeed, the goal is by the end of NCMA, it should be rolled out. All the other partners in NCMA, that's what they do. They have use cases which they develop with the aim of making it real live and real scale. So that's what we need. So we need a change in regulation so that indeed we acknowledge that TSOs and DSOs have an equal impact on the system, and we leverage. A very important thing also is end-to-end responsibility. When it comes to activating flexibility, everyone thinks it's a beautiful word, it will improve the system, and everyone is fine with it. But as much as it can be a beneficial use, when it's used correctly, it can have a very dangerous role if it's in the hands of malicious people or just careless people. So we really need end-to-end responsibility. So whoever is in the middle between the system operator and the technical resource, between a market participant and a technical resource, is ruled under EU rules or national rules. So technical aggregators, DR operators, the manufacturers of the equipment, if you can input a firmware update, maybe it's malicious or not. If you can command and control it, maybe it's good or not. If you rely through a cloud, is it good or not? So all these things need to be ruled, and indeed, in NCDR, there should be end-to-end responsibility.
Okay,
so we develop data exchange, but it needs to rely on the safe and reliable framework.
Okay, so in CMA as a blueprint for what are the flexibility use cases that really work, but also with some clear guidance towards how to do that in a secure and operational safe way. Okay, sounds like a plan and a mission. Maybe moving back to something that has been mentioned a lot, the GRID package. And there is a lot of hope that the GRID package will deliver. Maybe first asking for somebody who was not directly involved in the GRID package. I'm going to Miriam. When you saw what came out, were you happy? Was this what is needed? What's your view on it? What is it bringing us? And maybe do you still see some challenges or gaps what you would like to see to be developed in upcoming iterations?
Thank you. Well, first of all, the grid package needs to give a clear direction of travel for the sector in order to allow for realistic system planning, but also to align with wider EU policies. And we think that the EU grid package has rightly, strongly emphasized centralized planning and better coordination. It also discussed the deployment of digital solutions and smart grid equipment, and a big focus on increased interconnectivity and cost sharing across borders, which are all essential to deliver on the different targets. What we would want to see more emphasis on is the big challenge of the bottlenecks in the supply chain and how to manage this because costs and lead times are increasing as we speak. In terms of financing, the grid package mentions financial barriers such as de-risking private investment, but also to unlocking financing from institutional investors. And EIB is ready and wants to support and discuss concrete actions on how to do that. And we are welcoming very much a clean energy investment strategy that is coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe going immediately back to Marek, what Mirjam mentions here as potential elements that might be reinforced. Will the grid package deliver, or what, according to the Commission, is still needed to do more?
Yes.
Good. Next question.
No, I think, let's say the grids package is a key part of making sure that the networks basically are ready or become ready to enable the energy transition. And so it's not just about making better use of the networks, it's also just promoting the investments, make it easier, faster permitting. And there are a lot of very important things there that will help in making sure that the investments happen. But it's not the only thing that is supposed to do that. In particular, if we just talk about, let's say, the energy system, so the grids, but also everything connected to it, some of these things are also addressed in the grids package, like some guidance on investments, etc. But there is also an important issue, which is about how tariff setting can help making better use of the network. That's something that our colleagues are working on. Personally, we are working very much on the digitalization angle of the grids, in particular also promoting flexibility and looking at the data exchange and how to make that easy. Not just addressing, let's say, the E.DSO cooperation and make the data exchange easier on that side, because quite a lot of that, in particular if we talk about flexibility, is covered in the demand response network code, but also in making sure that there will be a competitive market for flexibility, that it's easy for consumers, let's say easy for aggregators via consumers or device manufacturers to bring their flexibility assets to the market, and to make sure that consumers have a choice, so that it's not, let's say, they buy an electric car and the electric car manufacturer decides what happens with the flexibility that's in that car, because these are huge volumes of flexibility. If we look at, let's say, the rollout of EV, that is basically, it doesn't require any DSO investment in hardware in order to make use of, well, let's say, not much investment compared to investing in a lot of batteries. So there is a whole of battery capacity available that other people pay for that can help in improving the grid efficiency. But this requires making it easy to bring that type of flexibility to the market. And that is, that's what a project like Enchem is looking at. And I've been very involved in the cooperation between the energy and the transport sectors over the last year to discuss how do we make this data exchange work. And we see there also a huge drive from the EV manufacturers who realize that there is a lot of potential there, that this can be part of a commercial offer of selling a car and making an EV cheaper, but that it requires also an infrastructure to make that data exchange easy. And let's not forget, I think Luis was talking about let's say, becoming a digital colony and the sovereignty aspect. We think that it's also extremely important in, let's say, the world we're currently in, that this type of infrastructure is run and governed in Europe. That this is not let's say, either a monopoly or even worse, a monopoly that is not even falling under EU legislation. So I think I'm highlighting this as one example of some of the key things that is about looking at more than just the network, but looking at the system as a whole and making sure that all these investments in renewables, in flexible assets, can happen and can be made easy and can become part of the total value proposition. Because if we talk about rolling out flexibility that can make a car cheaper, then let's say if that requires some investments on the grid side to run such an infrastructure, that's a trade-off that's probably relatively easily made. So if we look at all these things in isolation, we also may make the wrong decisions in terms of cost and benefits.
Okay, clear, a bigger picture, and I heard in your answer actually very interesting follow-up questions for all of the speakers. So maybe starting with Juan, Mike mentioned that it's not only about investment, it's also about smart collaboration, smart planning, maybe avoiding certain investments. Can you say something on the potential collaboration between TSOs and DSOs, smart integrated planning? Can it help us?
Okay, I'm quite convinced that system planning must be integrated between DSO and TSO. I am sure about this. Maybe a good example is the arrival of these large data centers. No? We have a little bit the feeling that these large data centers out of bidding or displacing the DSO's request. Okay, and we understand that the traditional algorithm Fiat Confier serve is the norm, but I think we should be able to make a long-term planning and to find a strategy to allocate the remaining network capacity. Because at the very end, nowadays, we have not this capacity. When we find the TSO in our coordination windows, we realize that the situation is much worse than we expected. So there is no space for a geostrategic national planning. There is no space for an industrial national planning. We should make together this planification. I don't know if there could be incentives. I think to have a common national strategy, a European level national strategy, should be an incentive for all of us to make this planning together. But anyway, trying to find another incentive and being a little bit provocative, maybe an incentive for DSOs could be to construct again transmission networks, not just to let in the hands of the TSO the construction of the transmission network. Maybe DSO should support them to do this. Of course, the operation should be in the hands of the system.
Okay, interesting reflection. Maybe asking Hubert, Mark spoke about data exchange. Also what Juan mentioned requires a lot of, I would say, sharing of data in an efficient, safe way. What are the contributions or the insights from INCIEME on this? Are there still gaps, data gaps that needs to be solved, and how can the regulator then help you?
No, what we do in INCIEME indeed is to build a framework for data exchange. So we define harmonized roles. Based on those harmonized roles, we define harmonized roles procedures that tells who does what when and what kind of data we exchange. And we develop the APIs or whatever data exchange to work. And we make sure that it can access any kind of resource, any kind of framework. Like I said, flexibility programs is basically a kind of a governing framework that manages balancing services, local services, FCAs, and so forth. So we have a single framework. What we also work in CMA is to define the content of the data. So there is also a work stream on data standardization. And indeed, it's something that we share with TSOs. So indeed, we need to work more on standardization within INCIEME, but also in other standard bodies. We need also to work on the rules. In INCIEME, we also have some TSOs on board, and indeed, starting to work on the rules, network codes we should, but also in INCIEME, so we showcase that we can actually do many things together. Okay,
I heard something on the need for remuneration, the need for incentives to work together, also on standardization. Well, that calls for a reaction of a regulator. What can you bring to actually incentivize and to make this happen at a national operational level?
Yes. Well, as I said before, the question is less about the volume of investment and more about the decision quality of that investment. I believe that good regulation should reward outcomes and not only assets. Of course, putting this principle into practice is a completely different question. In Portugal, let me say that we have stated in our national law that network operators should procure alternatives to grid reinforcements in the market and optimize the use of their networks. So having this principle stated in the national law, the regulation that comes below has already adapted, of course, its mindset to, let's say, introduce it, embed this principle in its regulation approach. One of the solutions that we have implemented is the TOTEX approach that I have talked about in my previous question. And to be sure, this TOTEX approach, I'm not saying that we should not properly remunerate the assets or by an efficient and a good rate of return. The TOTEX model does that. I'm saying that that is not the only thing that we should look at. When we talk about the TOTEX approach, we are talking also about setting explicit incentives to network operators to perform in a given way. For example, for this new regulation period, we have set an explicit incentive to network operators to allocate flexible grid connections, both to generators and consumers. This is a good way to promote a given goal that we want,
That's actually a very good teaser, what you now say, because it will come back in panel 2 and panel 3.
Yeah.
So maybe let's keep that point on those new ways to also engage consumers, and then it is indeed triggered by regulation, because there is an important question, and it's the final question, probably the question that will wrap up a lot of what has been said by those other speakers. Miriam, when you hear all those things, a lot of investments need to be made, but there is a question, how can we make it bankable? So give me your overall perspective, what you have heard today, how the European Investment Bank is looking at it, what is bankability means, and what are the learnings that we need all to take away from this panel.
Well, thank you very much. That's a big question, but I'm happy to shift the discussion a bit to the financing part in order to meet the needs. And I would like to start with opportunities, because first of all, grids are absolutely essential in order to deliver on the Green Deal and Repower EU. And that makes grid a strategic asset class with long-term relevance for investors. It's also one of the most attractive long-term infrastructure investment in Europe. DSOs are operating under a regulated environment with stable and predictable models, which is exactly what long-term financiers are looking for. And there is a strong political momentum behind the sector, and EU-level instruments such as CEF and InvestEU that all reinforce the investment case. But there also comes with challenges, and in our regular discussions and exchange with DSOs and TSOs, and also highlighted in the Draghi report, there is a limited debt capacity within the companies to take up more debt. They are more or less asked to double their investments in comparison to historical levels, and this puts pressure on their credit ratings and debt equity ratios, which needs to be managed, and more equity might need to be raised in order to be able to access affordable debt. Secondly, adding to the complexity is also, we see a very fragmented sector, ranging from large-scale multinational transmission system operator to medium-sized DSOs, but also small-scale municipal distribution system operator. So it's not possible to propose one coherent financing solution for all. And thirdly, the challenge is, as has been mentioned a lot, is the regulatory uncertainty that still remains. In order to address these challenges, as I already mentioned, EIB has more or less tripled its financing to electricity grids in comparison to the years 2020. And we have a lot of tools available in order to finance these investments. It's ranging from direct loans, we have project finance tools, intermediated financing, but also we are purchasing corporate hybrid bonds that TSOs and DSOs are issuing. We have launched a 1.5 counter guarantee program in order to support the electricity grid equipment manufacturing in Europe. And we also have initiatives to target the more fragmented part of the DSO sector with targeted support to smaller municipal DSOs.
Okay, I would say impressive, and that brings us to the end of this panel. So it's clear that we have some A-list stars here, and that that the movie The Great Acceleration will for sure have a positive end. I would like you to have a final applause for our speakers of the first panel. Unfortunately, there was no time anymore for questions, but I saw that there is now a break, so I would invite you to continue the discussion on investment, and I give back the floor to Giles.
And thank you to our great moderator, Helena. Thank you. And I just want to, before we go to the coffee break, highlight that we have our third Digital Innovation Award today. And you can see the 5 companies there that are vying for the award. There's the QR code to be able to vote. We do ask that you later on today listen to all 5 of their pitches and then vote, but you can already take a look and see what you think, and I encourage you to talk to them outside and indeed talk to each other during the coffee break. So enjoy the coffee break. Thanks to our first panel, and thanks to Helena.
Yes.